So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Provincial Office webinar, with a special welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. I hope you're all well. My name's Andrew Rydell, and I'm the Provincial Deputy Grand Secretary. When we started running these curated webinars around about 10 weeks ago, two of the first sessions covered mentoring and membership, respectively. Whilst the members' pathway was brought up on both of these sessions, it became clear that there was a need to dive a bit deeper into it. In order to help us do that, I'd like to introduce Tony Harvey. Tony was the 2012 Prestonian Lecturer. His talks and articles combine historical analysis with an understanding of organisational development to promote forward-thinking approach to Freemasonry, whilst retaining our fundamental meaning and purpose. He's the architect of the Members' Pathway, having proposed it to UGLE in 2015. The pathway has since been rolled out to all provinces and has been described as a game changer in Masonic membership by the Programme Master no less. Since its inception, it has had a demonstrable positive impact on the membership of lodges and chapters. Tony, welcome to the province of West Lancashire. Thank you for being here today. I've spoken enough. I'll hand straight over to you.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, brethren, for inviting me. It's good to be back in the province of West Lancashire, and I'm delighted to be speaking to you today about the Members' Pathway. As Andrew says, I've been involved in the development of the Members' Pathway ever since its inception in 2015, but I hasten to add this is very much a team effort. There's been a number of us involved over that time. The Members' Pathway is currently under the management of United Grand Lodge's Membership Working Party subgroup, and I'm a member of that group. What I'd like to do today, brethren, is to take you over a sort of background or outline of the Members' Pathway, what it is and why, and I then want to walk you through the steps, hopefully in overview rather than great detail, and then to look at the current materials and to give an indication of our overall direction of travel. Before I do that, I'd just like each of you to think about what do you know about the Members' Pathway? And if you could just write in no more than 3 words, that's going to be a challenge, no more than 3 words, what you know about the Members' Pathway. If you could just write that in the chat area, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. It will just give me an indication of where our starting point is and what your current level of knowledge is. So no more than 3 words. What do you know about the Members' Pathway? Just write in the chat area, please. This is great, brethren, really helpful. Thanks for keeping to the 3 words. I'm getting a range of everything from not a lot or nothing through to some quite detailed knowledge and response. Okay. So thank you, brethren. Thank you. That's a very helpful start. So as I say, what I want to do in this talk is to take you through, first of all, an outline of the Members' Pathway. Then I'll literally walk you through the steps, and then we'll look at the material. So let's start with what it is and why. And in actual fact, I'm going to start with why. I'm going to take you back to 2014. And many of you will remember that United Grand Lodge set up something called the Membership Focus Group back then. And that group did some work to research the issue of membership and to try to identify patterns and solutions as a way forward. And the background to that was that for some considerable years, our membership has been in decline. And as a result of that, we have a number of lodges that are struggling. We might call them weak. And obviously a wish amongst those lodges to try to strengthen their position and to attract and retain new members. One startling statistic from that time was to discover that 1 in 5 of our new members do not stay or did not stay long enough as members of their lodges for them to be able to receive informal presentation their Grand Lodge certificate. 20% or so left their membership, resigned their membership before they'd been presented with their Grand Lodge certificate. And that was clearly something the Grand Lodge wanted to address. It developed a strategy published in 2015, and those of us who were members then would have had a leaflet attached to the December 2015 edition of Freemasonry Today, which outlined the strategy. And a core part of that strategy was focused on membership, with a wish to improve attraction and retention, to stabilize our membership at around 200,000. That's the approximate figure of members that we have at the present time. Incidentally, approximately the same as it was around 100 years ago in 1920. That's an aside. And clearly, a major objective was to reduce these early resignations, because the resignations are causing us a problem. In actual fact, brethren, there's only been a slow decline in the number of initiations. We're still quite good at initiating new members. Our biggest challenge is retaining them and therefore building up the strength of our lodges. So it's clear that if for some years we've been losing members and we've not been able to arrest that decline, it's clear that we have to do something different. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Something had to change. And therefore, the view was that what we needed was a planned approach, not just leave it to good intentions and good efforts. Let's bring together into a planned and structured approach all the best practice, all the good techniques that thriving lodges are using, because the truth is there are many thriving lodges in our constitution, and we can learn from those lodges. And we realized that a very important part of this was to be able to provide practical help to lodges, something that lodges could use to address their own situation. And the background research to that, we did, as part of that work, we did undertake a lot of internal research. The MFG, Membership Focus Group, undertook a lot of internal research, and a lot of you may remember back in those days being asked to complete online surveys. We had a very good response rate to that. We also undertook some external research, looking at how people join membership organisations. We looked at what some other organisations do. And one of the things we discovered, that only 9% of members of membership organisations join as a result of promotion or marketing or advertising. The others, the 90%, join through direct contact. They join through word of mouth, or somebody invited them, or they had some prior contacts with the organisation itself. So it's how we enable our own membership, and particularly at lodge level, to take advantage and use that statistic and equip them with the means by which they can engage with their friends and contacts, engage with members of the public who are interested, and to take them on a process to obviously eventually join the craft. And we undertook a pilot study in the early days, focused on steps 5 and 6. And I'll explain what steps 5 and 6 are later, but we undertook a pilot study. Those steps were the ones that, if you like, represented something that we consider to be an absolutely key part, a hinge point in the whole process, and probably the biggest change in custom and practice for many lodges. And we undertook that research, or that pilot study, in 10 provinces, one of which was West Lancashire. So 12 of your lodges took part in that pilot study. And the feedback from the study convinced us, or reassured us, that there was very good support for the concept of the members' pathway and the broad approach. It suggested that the original style of materials, which were written a lot like the mentoring booklets that a lot of provinces by that time had written. So they were narrative style, they were prose, they were sort of explaining things. People wanted something punchier, series of bullet points. And so we rewrote the materials into that sort of style. And that was based upon the feedback we had from the pilot study. So that nicely leads me on, really, then, to say, what exactly is the members' pathway? What is this thing that we're talking about with capital M and capital P? And I guess the simplest way to outline it is to say that it tracks the route that an interested person would take from being outside of the Freemasonry and not a member of the craft, all the way through to that person becoming a committed Master Mason. And that's quite an important point. A committed Master Mason, somebody who enjoys his Freemasonry, who's involved in his lodge at the level that he wishes, and where we can be reasonably confident that he's likely to remain a member for some time to come. It doesn't suggest it's the end of the support process, but it's as far as the members' pathway takes us, certainly at the moment. And to do that, we mapped out that journey into 11 steps, and we provided, if you like, guidance around those steps. And those steps represent the stages from somebody being outside of the craft all the way through to how we might attract them to Freemasonry, how we would introduce them into our lodge and go through a few processes there, which I'll come back to, how we take them through into membership, and then, of course, how we provide support and retain their active membership. And those 11 steps essentially comprise processes, techniques, tools, good practice that have been developed in growing lodges and elsewhere. So we know they work, and we know they're effective. And I think the last point I really want to emphasize at this stage is the members' pathway is directed at lodges. It's to put in lodges' hands the means for lodges to be able to manage their own future, to put their destiny, if you like, into the lodge's hands. It's not prescriptive. It's not a set of rules. It's not something that's mandated. Although I think it's clear that if a lodge chooses not to follow what is offered, then it might mean that, and in some cases, in some provinces say, if you want to engage with X or Y initiative, then we would like you to engage with the members' pathway. But that's a local issue for provinces to decide. So it's aimed at lodges, and those lodges supported by provinces by a support structure, which I'll outline shortly. So just to expand on that, it's a continuous and integrated process. It's seamless. If you follow it from beginning to end, it will take you through the sort of life cycle of how to get the lodge ready to bring in new people, how to follow all the steps involved, and how to ensure that you've got a very good chance of retaining not only the majority of them, but ensuring that they have a good time in Freemasonry. It satisfies their expectations. It does encompass mentoring. So we introduced Masonic mentoring some years ago, but we didn't. And when we did that, we offered some good ideas about mentoring, and mentoring, if you like, comprised a number of good principles, but we didn't offer any substance around that. We didn't offer any underlying process for mentoring. We didn't offer any tools and techniques for mentoring. So what the members' pathway does is encompass mentoring. It brings mentoring under its banner, and through that we're providing people with processes and approaches for mentoring, as well as other aspects of membership. And there's a link to the Royal Arch as well. There's a very clear, one of the steps is concerned with how we introduce a Master Mason to the Royal Arch, and that step was developed with the third grand principle. So you can take it's authoritative in terms of reference to the Royal Arch. And what we want to achieve through the use of the members' pathway are these results. First of all, more people becoming Freemasons and remaining to become committed Master Masons. We want to improve that introductory process. We want to attract more people, and we want to retain more people in the craft. And the result of that will be a stronger and more sustainable lodges. And ultimately, that will arrest the decline in membership, ultimately. A lot of work's got to go in to achieve that, but this is the toolkit for lodges to help lodges contribute their part to it, and ensure their own sustainable future. So let me just give you an overview of the model. That's how we present the overview of the model, at least at the moment. And you can see it's in 3 parts. The first 6 steps are to do with attracting and introducing somebody to Freemasonry, and that takes us up to the end, essentially, of the interview process. After the interview process, the next stage moves on, and that is concerned with introducing or initiating someone, preparing them for initiation, taking them through their early experiences as a Freemason, mentoring, and retaining their active membership. And by active, I don't necessarily mean active in the sense of necessarily taking office. I mean active at the level that they wish to be active within Freemasonry. And the final stage is about what do we do if a member resigns, and how might we retrieve that membership. Now, I know that in West Lancashire, you have a slightly altered version of this in the sense that the first step, lodge planning, is seen as an ambassadorial role. And that's something that I know that Neil Ward and Stuart Cranage will want to emphasise in their work with you. So let's just move on to look at roles, because the members pathway does clarify, if you like, some roles. First of all, it introduces a new role for Lodge Membership Officer, or LMO. And the role of this person essentially is to coordinate the steps 1 to 6, to help lodges through those stages, to facilitate the development, as we'll see, of a lodge plan, with support from the province, or in your case, perhaps your group level, if required, and to support sponsors as they introduce new members into the craft. And 1 to 6 takes us up to the interview. So the Lodge Membership Officer would also have a role in supporting the interview process. Once somebody's been accepted through the interview process, the Lodge Mentor takes over and coordinates the steps after that, working with personal mentors, proposers and seconders, and others in the lodge. If somebody is looking as if they might resign, or actually does resign, then the Lodge Almoner has a key role to play there. And what we hope is that through step 11, we can either minimise those resignations or encourage people to remain in the craft. And if somebody actually does confirm a resignation, then really it's over to either the province or the group to pick that up. So there's a role there for the province or the group at step 11 as well. And within the materials for the members pathway, we have defined those roles at both lodge level and at provincial level. So at provincial level, you have a provincial membership officer in Neil Ward, you have a provincial mentor, provincial grand mentor in Stuart Cranage, and I know that you have people at group levels as well. But I should emphasise that although we've defined those roles, there is obviously a lot of flexibility into how a lodge carries out those roles. So a lodge might appoint different people to undertake those different roles. In some cases, a lodge might say, well, the mentor is also the membership officer, so one person does both roles. In another lodge, we know that in some lodges, the lodge secretary has chosen or wishes or wants to act as the lodge membership officer as well. It's really down to lodges how they organise that. What we've done is lay out what those roles involve, and it's for you to decide who has them and how you organise those within, excuse me, within your lodges. So before I go on to the steps, I'm just going to pause it there, and Andrew, I'm just going to ask if there's any questions of clarification. So I don't want to, before we turn into the steps, before we go any further, I just want to check that people have got the overall information, the high level information they need about the what and why. And perhaps, you know, I might be able to take 1 or 2 questions given the time. So if that's okay with you, Andrew, if anybody wants to just questions of clarification up to this point.
There's been one question in the chat whilst you've been on there about the application of the members pathway to the Royal Arch as well. And you can see from the steps that they're all absolutely applicable in terms of the key principles of identifying members, etc., and taking through that. There's another question.
Can I just, can I give a brief response to that first question? So the members pathway is focused on the situation where we're wishing to attract people who are not yet Freemasons. But it then offers good practice for introducing people into a membership unit, our lodge. So there's a lot of material in there which will help a chapter if the chapter, excuse me, picks and chooses those elements, those parts. which are appropriate for it. Now, of course, a chapter seeks its membership from craft masons. So there's a much more clearly defined, I'll use the term market, for members of a chapter. So it is open for chapters to, if you like, to also adopt the members pathway and to use those parts of the members pathway that are appropriate and relevant to it. And I know that there are some chapters that have done some work on that. So yeah, I would encourage chapters to adopt those parts which are relevant to bringing in, introducing, and supporting and retaining members. And one key thing is we do know that if people join the Royal Arch, they're more likely to remain as involved craft masons. So I'll take one more question if it's relating to what I've already outlined, Andrew.
There's no other questions at this point in time, no.
Okay, thank you. I'm just picking up Chris Butterfield's comment there, and I'll make this response to it, and then we'll move on. And if you want to pick up Royal Arch issues later, I'm very happy to do so in the general Q&A. But just in a quick response to Chris, because I think it's an important point he makes. He said, is it not important to ensure that potential members know about the Royal Arch in the early steps? Absolutely, Chris. I fully support that, and so do my colleagues who worked on the development of this. And that's why the members pathway includes reference to the Royal Arch. So moving on from there, thank you very much. I'm just checking my screen is still shared. It is indeed. So I'm going to take you through the steps now, brethren, and what I seek to do now is to give you a brief overall outline of each of the steps and how they fit together. And obviously, if there's questions about these, we can come back to them in the general Q&A afterwards. So the whole foundation of the members pathway rests on step one. Step one is about getting the lodge into a position where it's fit for the future, where it is able to attract, introduce and retain members. It's no good introducing members if the lodge is in a situation where it's not going to keep them. If it's unable to keep members and loses members that it introduces, then we end up with more people out there who've had an experience of Freemasonry, have been dissatisfied, disappointed, and leave us early. And of course, what they're doing is telling all their friends and contacts, other potential members, of a negative experience. So the first point, the first step in the members pathway is to help the lodge get itself fit for the future. So we're not rushing to try to find new candidates. We're starting by looking inwards, looking at the lodge, how it operates, its practices, and to see whether those practices are still relevant, still appropriate, and whether or not those practices need a revision, need updating, need some remedial work. And from that, develop a lodge plan. And a lodge plan outlines how the lodge is going to evolve over the next, and I would always say 5 years as a start point. 5 years is a good window. It looks at perhaps a transition of officers over that time, and it gives us a far enough ahead point for us to have some sense of real purpose. And of course, the plan then starts looking at actions that we would undertake in order to achieve that 5-year purpose. So a lodge plan, and of course, bear in mind the members pathway offers the means by which you can do this. The lodge plan is an output from step one, and a lodge profile. And a profile is an internal document that, if you like, defines what the lodge is. It's not meant as a marketing document, but marketing documents may be developed from it. It's for an internal audience, and it really clarifies for the lodge itself who we are, what we are, and from that leads into, for many lodges, a candidate profile, which defines, if you like, what the sort of person we're looking for, the sort of person that would make a good member for this lodge, the sort of person who would enjoy membership of this lodge, and somebody who would be compatible with either what we are or what we seek to become. There's also reference in there to increasing the lodge's visibility in the local community, whether that local community is a geographical community or whether it's an interest group, for example. And at this stage, the lodge can also think about assigning specific responsibilities for various roles, the lodge membership officer role, people who are involved in interview, and so forth.
Tony,
so that's
just Just to jump in on that, there's a question in the chat which I think you've just answered there, but I'll just flag it up anyway. Somebody's asked a question of daytime lodges and how they fit into that, but that's clearly ensuring that the lodge is fit for purpose and the kind of people that they want to the lodge wants to attract. If it's applicable to a daytime lodge, then that's where it fits in for this.
Yeah, and if you're picking up Stephen Lunt's question, in terms of policy for encouraging daytime lodges, I think that's more of a provincial matter. To refer to another one of my talks, which looks at evolution and change, if there is a range of options of lodges, if there are lodges that, for example, meet at different times or are intended for people with different interests, then there is scope and there is choice. And that means that people who wish to join us are more likely to be able to find a lodge that meets their needs, that is relevant to them. And clearly there are some people who would like to be Freemasons or who are Freemasons who would rather meet during the daytime than in the evening. So a range of options and choices is always better. And a lodge can find a niche for itself by looking at who are the potential people we want to attract and how do we position ourselves in terms of when we meet, where we meet, what time we meet, how we do our business in order to attract those particular people. And step one helps a lodge go through that review process, that thought process. Okay, I'm going to move on. We can always pick up particular issues in the question and answer later. So step two builds on step one. Once the lodge is clear about its direction of travel, where it's going, how it wants to evolve and what it wants to become within the next 5 years, then the next stage is for the lodge, whilst it's working on that, to start thinking about potential or prospective candidates, people who are already in our networks, people who we already have some contact with, whether they be friends, colleagues, suppliers, fellow worshippers, whatever. There are a lot of people in our contacts who we already know. I know a lot of people say, well, I've already brought in all of my friends, and that may well be true. But and there are techniques in this to help us do that, if we cast our net wider, it's amazing how many people we know who could make good Freemasons if we go through the process of contacting them. Remember, 91% of people joining membership organisations do so through direct contact, one-to-one contact with somebody. So it's how we leverage that, it's how we generate that. So step two takes us through a process of identifying those people and then filtering those lists by using the lodge and the candidate profiles from step one, so that we arrive at a short list of people who we might want to approach, not to invite them to become Freemasons. We all know, brethren, that people have to ask to become Freemasons, but to discuss Freemasonry with them, to perhaps introduce them to Freemasonry, get them involved in things like white table meetings, social events, and so forth, to put, if you like, Freemasonry on their agenda and to start a process of discussion about Freemasonry. So step two is about identifying those people. And by the end of step two, and the transition to step three is really that members of the lodge have some people that they can approach to discuss Freemasonry with. Step three is a really important step. A lot of new members in particular don't really know what they can say about Freemasonry and how to approach people to talk about it. So step three provides them with that guidance, that reassurance, that permission, if you like, to talk to people about Freemasonry. And there's plenty of rich material in there to help with that and to help with responding to questions. And by the end of step three, then I think a member of the lodge and somebody they've been discussing Freemasonry with they'll know between them whether or not the person has sufficient interest to really start taking it serious and take it further. And equally, they might realise that actually the person has no interest, and now is an appropriate time to drop the subject and not to keep pestering the person concerned. So step three is all about existing members following up on the people they identified in step two and approaching those members to raise the issue, to discuss Freemasonry, and to create the opportunity for that other person if they wish it. Now, in parallel with step 3, we have step 4. I should say, in parallel to steps 2 and 3, we have step 4, because there are still that 9%, and the more we do positive promotion of Freemasonry, the more we raise the public's awareness of us, the more we improve our visibility and grow that respect that we want to get back, if you like, from our communities, the more people will approach us, and the methodologies for doing that are now well developed, websites and so forth, and now the events we run. So step 4 is all about how do we respond to inquiries that come to us. What do we do if somebody who we don't know wants to engage with Freemasonry, wants to find out about it? How do we filter those? How do we do the due diligence? How do we check that they are fit and proper persons? And how do we check that they're appropriate people for our particular lodge? So step 4 is really about how a lodge supported by the province might respond to those people in those early stages and filter out the people who wouldn't meet our high-level membership requirements. And step 4 finishes really when 2 members of the lodge say, yeah, I know this person well enough now for me to be willing to propose or second them. So we don't rush this introduction of people that we don't know. We take them through enough of a process for us to get to know them well enough for somebody to wish to be a proposer or a seconder. And at that point, step 5, then step 3 and 4, if you like, converges. And this is how we prepare people for the lodge interview. So there's still a very important role for the lodge interview, but this another way of looking at this is screening. How do we screen people just to check that they do meet our membership requirements, that they would satisfy a lodge committee, if you like, but not only that, that they're also appropriate for our particular lodge. So there are a lot of people who might be very good candidates for Freemasonry or applicants for Freemasonry, but they might not fit into a particular lodge. So it's important to ensure that people join the right lodge. And those people who've been involved at provincial level in following up people who resign often find that people join for the right reasons, but perhaps they joined the wrong lodge, or they joined a lodge that wasn't able to meet its expectations. So it's really important in step 5 that a lodge considers whether this person is right for this lodge, and the lodge is right for them. And the end of step 5 is the person completes the formal application, the Form P in our case, and that is submitted to the lodge secretary. And what the members' pathway doesn't do is it doesn't change the book of constitutions. It doesn't change the process that we follow using Form P in order to introduce people into the lodge. So that all continues as it is. And of course, you as lodge secretaries would know that there are people in process here who are being, who our members are meeting to discuss Freemasonry with them. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to you when you get an application. And of course, what you will want to do as a lodge secretary is to interview or arrange for the interview of that person who at this stage is not a candidate, they're an applicant. They've applied to become a Freemason. Now, one of the key things that we did in developing the members' pathway was to look at what other organisations do when they interview applicants, and to look at experiences that applicants have when they go to interview. And one of the big things was, you know, a poorly planned interview comprising all of the past masters of the lodge who haven't agreed how they're going to run the interview, or who's going to ask what question, or who ask inappropriate questions. It creates a bad experience, often an intimidating experience. So we looked at what is good practice in this area, and what we came up with was to create a lodge interview panel. So if you imagine a small group of people within the lodge who are recognised by the lodge as interviewers, they have skills in interviewing, they have some experience in interviewing, and for each interview you pick 3 people from that pool who will conduct the interview on a specific occasion. And this, I should say at this point, that it was step 5 and step 6 that we piloted back in 2016-17. So what the interview panel do is that they conduct the interviews, and they then recommend the applicant to the lodge if they believe that this person is a fit and proper person to join this lodge. There are a number of outcomes. One of the outcomes is this person would make a good Freemason, but this isn't the right lodge for them. And it's interesting how feedback is telling us that more and more lodges are realizing that option. And by going through this process, are picking up people who, if they had admitted them, might have ended up leaving because they joined the wrong lodge. So that is seen, and going right back to the pilot, that was seen as a positive outcome, being able to identify those people. And of course, if the interview is successful and the lodge supports the recommendation of the interview panel, then it goes through ballot and everything else. So that stage there represents the end of steps 1 to 6, which are in the domain of the lodge membership officer. Literally, the applicant, if he's successful at this point, is handed over to the domain of the lodge mentor, and that moves on with step 7. And I'll come back to the idea of a training package and what that's about. I'll talk about that a little later. So step 7 is about preparing he's now a candidate. We've accepted him. We've been through all the formal procedures that we know as lodge secretaries. And whilst he's been prepared for interview, part of that process is that the lodge mentor will sort out who will be the personal mentor. That might be the proposer or seconder, if they have the relevant experience, if they're available, if they have the right sort of approach to that sort of work as a mentor. It might be somebody else. It might be somebody who might be able to do, might be able to do the job differently or more appropriately for that particular candidate. A lot of effort in step 7 goes into how to help the candidate prepare himself mentally for initiation, so that he understands the step he's taking, the significance of it, and so that first evening is a memorable experience for all the right reasons. And also so that when he goes home at the end of that first meeting, he knows what he can say to his partner or his friends or whoever who might be asking. So we're already starting the process of mentoring. That starts at step 7 before the person has even been initiated. Once he is a Freemason, we move into step 8, and this is where we really concentrate on the mentoring, the early stages of the mentoring process. We are supporting the person through his early degrees, through the other degrees in the craft. And that's the work of the personal mentor, supported by others in the lodge. And the role of the lodge mentor, and this is all defined in the members' pathway, the role of the lodge mentor is to ensure that there is a planned approach to mentoring, that every person who needs a mentor has a mentor, and that mentor is working with them, and that we don't leave things to chance. What we do is we break mentoring down into 3 areas of personal need that the individual new member has. So mentoring isn't about the lodge processing a new member and instructing that person in what the lodge thinks he needs to know. Mentoring is about putting the individual in the middle of the process and saying, what are his needs? What information does he want and how does he want to receive it? What personal contact does he want and how often and in what form? And what tangible support and encouragement does he want? And we're all different. Our needs for these things are different. So, for example, a lot of people love receiving material, content, new learning nowadays in video form. I hate it. I get frustrated with the video. I want to move forward, get me to the next point, because I can absorb the written word quickly and efficiently. I can move backwards and forwards with the written word. I can test it. I can question it. I can clarify it. So I like to read things. I don't like to absorb things through video. Other people are different, and a lot of young people like to absorb things through short videos. So mentoring is all about understanding those differences and those individual needs, and helping that person find the information he wants with the personal contact that is most appropriate to him and the support that is most helpful. So step 8 is what we do through those early years in Freemasonry, and how we take that person through to the point where they're a Master Mason and they've got some involvement in the lodge as well, whether that be an office or an informal role, or whatever it is that that person wants from his Freemasonry. That means that it's an appropriate time to introduce the Royal Arch. Now, as we said earlier, the Royal Arch should be mentioned earlier in the whole process. The person should be very much aware of the Royal Arch, and that we introduce the Royal Arch as a further part of Freemasonry, actually in step 5. So we're not holding anything back, but step 9 is all about how we introduce somebody to the Royal Arch and discuss with them whether it's appropriate point for them to join. It covers well-established reasons for becoming a Royal Arch Mason, and it clarifies the message of the relationship between the craft and the Royal Arch. And it also mentions Royal Arch representatives in lodges. Now, they are very different in different provinces. The structure of those roles vary from province to province. So there's not the level of detail in that particular role as there are in some other roles. But we do emphasise the importance of the Royal Arch representative by whatever name they go in the province. And I'm just picking up a message from Paul Renton, so I suspect we'll pick up the issue of the Royal Arch later. So step 10 is about how we retain our members, how we retain their interest, how we maximise their enjoyment, how we continue mentoring. Mentoring doesn't stop just because somebody is a Master Mason. So how do we continue that mentoring and fine-tune it for the individual? How do we find the level of involvement that individual wants? It's also, step 10 is also about identifying, being sensitive to any signs of dissatisfaction. And the signs of dissatisfaction are quite well established in Freemasonry. I mean, one of the classic signs that somebody's dissatisfied with their membership is a drop in attendance. It's quite obvious, really. Why do you carry on giving time to something that you're not satisfied with? So if we monitor those signs, then we might be able to arrest the dissatisfaction and address it before it gets too bad. And this is where the Lodge Almoner comes in and has a particular role to play as part of the care team, if you like, that comprises the membership officer, the mentor, the personal mentors, and the Lodge Almoner. We also reference other orders and degrees and acknowledge the fact that they exist and that for many of us they represent an important part of our Freemasonry. But bear in mind that the emphasis here is very much on the craft and also on the Royal Arch. Step 11 then is what do we do if somebody does resign, or if it's clear that somebody's about to resign? And this is very much in the hands, or the work here is led by the Lodge Almoner. And of course, the Lodge Secretary has a key role to play here, because the Lodge Secretary is often the communication hub in the Lodge. He's often the person who will first know that somebody has submitted apologies for the 3rd time in a row, or for 2 meetings in a row, we've not heard from them. So the Lodge Secretary is often the one that can initiate or trigger some action by somebody else to try to mitigate the possibility of a resignation. But step 11 then is very much about retrieving members, and a lot of step 11 is also focused on the province, because if somebody does resign and the Lodge accepts the resignation, incidentally, the Lodge doesn't have to accept a resignation, but that's, and your secretaries, you'll know about the rules about that. But if somebody does resign and that the Lodge accepts that, then the person then falls into the province. So there's some guidance there for provinces about how the province might follow up a resignation. Because, of course, a resignation from a Lodge is also a resignation from the province, and the province doesn't want to lose members any more than a Lodge does. So there's things such as processes for exit interviews. And we've got 2 good approaches to exit interviews built in here. There are other approaches. It would be great to have some other examples of good practice that we can build in here. And I'm, as a trained and experienced manager of some years, it was ingrained in me in the early days to close the loop. So I'm a great believer in closing the loop. So, on reflection, what can we do to improve our use of the members pathway? Is now the time, having learned some lessons about people who choose to leave the lodge, is now the time for us to go back and look again at step one and the lodge plan, and to refine that and to refine the lodge profile and so forth. So it comes full circle. So I'm going to move on to look at materials, the pathway materials. I won't take too long on this, so then we'll be able to pick up any questions that you might have. And I know there's some questions in this particular area. So looking at the materials. Now, first thing is to say that when we first published the members pathway, it was published on a UGLE website essentially as one large PDF file. And we said at the time, this is not for downloading or printing. But of course, as soon as you say that, what you've now said to people is download and print. The idea of the PDF was to put all the material in one place with a lot of links between them. So I see the members pathway as a concept, as a series of steps with links between them, and actually in layers as well. So, and I'll take you through the layers in a second or two. We realised that when people had a concept of the PDF, that it looked big, it looked intimidating, it looked far too much. But it was never intended to be something to work through from beginning to end. So some months ago, we removed the PDF document and we put in its place a portal, and that's what you see on the screen here. If you go to that web address, you'll see on your screen, you'll see these tiles, and they take you into the part of the members pathway that you want. So you can get an overview, you can look at the key stages, you can then go down into further levels of detail. And I mentioned I mentioned earlier that the members pathway exists in layers, and it does. So let me just explain what I mean by that. Now these images here are of the materials as they currently exist. We realise that the materials as they currently exist are very word heavy. So we are in the process at the moment. We have a project at the moment to turn the words into something which is much more appealing, much more visually appealing, which breaks it down even further, and where we have much more graphics, many more visuals, flow diagrams, infographics, color, branding, and so forth. But nevertheless, it would still be in layers. So at the moment, we have a leaflet, which is freely available. We have a booklet, and then when we go onto the website, we see the steps, and each step looks something like that, but it's in 2 or 3 pages. A step is about 1,000 to 1,200 words, 2 to 2.5 pages, and they're written as bullet points. They're quite direct. The flowery language has been removed. And what the step does, that's a step, is it takes you through what to do at that point. For people who want some more information and some more help in how to do those things, there are lots of links in the steps, those blue bits there. If you click on those links, they'll take you through into the further layer, and that further layer we call good practice and support documents. So there's lots of good practice, lots of things under there, and the majority of the words are actually at this level. They explain how to do something. They take you through step by step, and in some cases they give you some background information as well, material from Grand Lodge and so forth, background research and so forth. So you can access the members pathway at those different layers. You can get a quick overview, so that's for all members of the lodge. You can then get a summary of each step just to help you orientate yourself. But for actual use, you probably want to get to the step guide, and if you want further support and help, you click through the links in the step guides into the good practice documents as well. So they're all designed to help you get the information that you want at the level that you want it. So what I've done here is shown you how they currently appear, but please understand there's a lot of work going on at the moment to change the appearance into something that's much more visually appealing and much more usable. And that's really what we need to see. There is some further materials to support our further learning. So if we want to understand more, if we want to develop some skills around the members pathway, there are some packages which are available for provinces, and in a province the size of West Lancashire, then the support would come from groups as well. Those packages are not released to lodges. They're essentially learning packages. They're written for skilled facilitators, skilled and experienced facilitators, and it's for them to run workshops within their groups or within their provinces. But so that you know it's available, there's a package that covers steps 1 to 6, another package that covers step 7 to 11, and these are designed to be sort of evening or afternoon workshops. And there's a package for interviewing skills as well. So if a lodge doesn't have skilled and experienced interviewers in its membership, then the province or the group can put on an interviewing skills workshop. It's only an introduction. I run 2-day interviewing skills workshops. That isn't a 2-day workshop. that's a 3.5 hour workshop. But it gives us a start and a good introduction. So that brings me really to the conclusion and an ask, brethren. So I hope what I've been able to demonstrate is what the members pathway is, what it offers you as lodges. It's a toolkit for you to use to strengthen your lodge, to attract new members and to retain those members. And remember that retention. We're losing far too many people at the moment. And although we're getting a lot better at retention, there's still a long way to go. We're still each year having more resignations than we've got initiations. So this is something that you can use at lodge level in each and every lodge to help you address those issues. And we know this material works because it comes from thriving and growing lodges. And it's been updated constantly with new material from good practice that we're getting from lodges and provinces. So what we want to achieve now is overall for the craft and our lodges, of course, to be able to retain first and then bring in good caliber members who are going to stay and are going to help our lodges to grow and be sustainable in the long term. We're looking to the long-term health of the craft. The ask for you, brethren, your secretaries, you're the hinge point in the lodge. You're the chief executive. You're the person who is right at the heart of the operation of the lodge. So what is really, really keen here is we want your active promotion and support of the use of the members pathway. And we'd like you to work with your lodge membership officer, your lodge mentor, and your lodge almoner to make it work and to make it a reality. We know that some lodges in West Lancashire are already using it in full. We've got a lot of lodges that are using it partially. We want to see a lot more lodges use it and embrace it. And a key part of that, brethren, if there's one key thing that will make the big difference, is to find the best person you can to be lodge membership officer, other than yourselves, of course. So to find the best person you can to be the lodge membership officer. And obviously there's some support for that as well from your groups and from your province. So with that, I think, Andrew and brethren, I'd like to move over to the Q&A, and I'm in your hands, Andrew.
Well, there's not been that many questions actually coming through. Alan Moore from the University of Liverpool Lodge has asked particularly how it relates to university scheme lodges where you may not necessarily expect to have the same levels of retention. But I suppose, well, I'll let you kind of answer.
Yeah, thank you. Well, university scheme lodges are also encouraged to adopt and use the members pathway. The tools in there are just as applicable to university scheme lodges. So reviewing how a lodge functions, its customs and practices, coming up with a lodge plan is absolutely keen. And I know from my own experience that many university scheme lodges have had experiences that they didn't expect when they converted to become a university scheme lodge. And so I've had to adapt, I've had to evolve. The step one is a great process. It's a great point to stop and review and take stock and to say, is what we're doing working? You know, what's working well? What are the things we think we want to improve upon? What are the things we want to stop doing? What are the things we want to start doing? And the opportunity exists for all lodges, including university scheme lodges, to go through that process as well. You specifically mentioned the issue of retention in university scheme lodges, and if a university scheme lodge accepts that it's a nursery, if you like, that introduces people but doesn't necessarily, you know, members of a university scheme lodge don't necessarily remain as a member, then that's fine. You just adopt or set your goals accordingly, and you accept that there is a natural departure of some members to other lodges. And so I would encourage a university scheme lodge to build relationships with reception lodges. There's a lot of them in London, for example, and to make sure that there's a smooth transition. So if somebody graduates and leaves the area, that before they resign, they go, they're welcomed into another lodge. And so there's a smooth transition. There's continuous service. What we don't want is that break in service. And I would encourage that in general, in any case. Step 11 includes the migration process when people leave an area and join and move to another. And I would always encourage people to join another lodge and their existing lodge to help them in that process before they resign. So the members' pathway is just as applicable to university scheme lodges. The processes work just as well. The difference is that a university scheme lodge perhaps needs to think about what its goals and modus operandi are. How will it work? In particular, with people as they progress into office, they may not get very far. So how do we provide shadow officers and backup support to university members who are beginning to do office? So there's a lot of issues I know that university scheme lodges have to address. The members' pathway will certainly help you do that. So thank you for the question.
I suppose in just to pick up on another aspect of that is with university scheme lodges, when you initiate somebody, you appreciate that they're not necessarily going to be with you for their whole Masonic career. I suppose the members' pathway brings in the idea of, whilst you may initiate somebody, they may ultimately decide that the lodge that they have been initiated into isn't the right one for them. And instead of letting them resign, it's about helping them grow in their masonry and maybe moving to a different lodge, which is a fit, and acknowledging that point as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I would say this though, Andrew, it is not inevitable that somebody resigns from their mother lodge when they graduate and move away with their career. I think, you know, university scheme lodges have the opportunity to think about what can we offer people who are no longer resident nearby, and is there something we can do to retain their membership of their mother lodge? But you know, that's something again which a lodge can think about as part of the step one process.
This question from Chris Taylor from Old Crosbane Lodge, which I think relates to step one. Are we looking to photo fit ideal candidates, or should we be looking to make our lodge ideal for other candidates?
I think that's an interesting question. I think to answer it, step one is a reflective process for the lodge. It encourages them to say, what are we, what do we want to be, and how do we transition? How do we move from where we are? And particularly if we've become a bit stale, stuck in our ways, if we haven't moved and adapted to the realities around us. And an important part of step one is for the lodge to say, where are our future members going to come from, and what do they want and need? Who do we think we are attractive and relevant to? And if the lodge can answer that and can be sure that there's a good number of people who fit that category, then that's all well and good. If the lodge says, actually, you know, there aren't people in that category, we need to change as a lodge, we need to evolve, or we need to decide on some alternative future for the lodge, then that again can be a positive outcome. So it isn't about saying let's stay put as we are and let's find people who will accept us. It is saying what is the reality of the outside world in which we live, in which our future members live. Are we positioned to be attractive to good people who we would like to see as members of this lodge in the future? So some lodges might go through step one and say, we've been struggling for a long time because actually, and we haven't realized it until now, there aren't many people who live in this village or this small town where we're located who spend their evenings from 6 o'clock in this small town because they're still traveling back from work. So we can't hope to attract anybody, a working man who lives nearby in this area, if we carry on as we are. So we need to either change our start time or change our focus to be more focused on the working man and move to a 7 o'clock start time or something like that. Or the lodge might say, actually, we're located in the wrong place because, as a local lodge, we don't have anybody who we don't have sufficient people who are likely to join us, and therefore we need to move our location. Or it might say, actually, let's align ourselves with a special interest because people don't spend their leisure time now less in their local communities and more with their special interest groups. And that's why I referred to special interest groups as a community. It's not a geographical one, but it's an interest one. And that's where I think there's a lot of growth. So the lodge asks itself these searching questions and makes the adaptations in such a way that it becomes attractive to a particular group of people. And that's where a candidate profile can fit in. And a candidate profile is really just that outline. It says, what's the sort of ideal person we're looking for? And the value of that is it's really helpful at step two.
Likewise, there's a point from David Parker that says, if all lodges had a profile for external use, then why not let a potential candidate review those profiles and then they choose one which they feel might be appropriate to them?
Absolutely. So just to go back to a point I made, the lodge profile as per the member's pathway is designed for internal use within Freemasonry. It defines what the lodge is and what its basic parameters are. And there's some good examples on there on the website, on the portal of different lodge profiles. And many provinces say to lodges, if you want to have unsponsored candidates, people who approach us and make inquiries, if you want to receive from us unsponsored candidates, we need your lodge profile. And based upon your lodge profile and possibly your lodge plan as well, so we know that you're progressive, you're thinking forward, you're addressing the issues of how you're going to introduce and retain these people. Based upon that, we will have confidence in feeding people towards you who fit your profile. So a lot of provinces are choosing to do that. That's not a mandated thing from Grand Lodge, but it is something that many provinces are choosing to do. And the better the plan is and the better the profiles are, the better it is, the easier it is for the province or whoever is doing that within the province to be able to direct appropriate candidates to appropriate lodges to do that match.
There's another point here from Andrew Makin from Barlow Moor Lodge that says just when somebody leaves, they tend to blame the man and not the lodge.
Yes.
Would you like to comment on that?
I would. It's an interesting point, and I'm very familiar with the phenomenon. And there's a good reason for it psychologically. It's called cognitive dissonance. We get very we get stressed when there's a clash between decisions that we've made. So we tend to defend a decision or defend our actions, and of course that protects us. It's a defense mechanism. So I've often heard it said, well, he wasn't right for us in the first place. If he wasn't right, you should have identified that prior to his initiation. Let's not treat candidates as ceremony fodder. Let's treat them as living beings who are going to either embrace Freemasonry or find that it's not for them. Let's try to do the best we can, and now we can do that using steps 5 and 6 to filter those out. I would rather a lodge say, what can we learn from this? And the more we understand why a person wants to join, what his expectations are, what involvement he wants, and the more we update those things over time, and that's through good quality mentoring, and it's through the mentor working also with other lodge officers. So it's no good the personal mentor finding actually this person doesn't want to progress in office, and then the person getting a letter from the secretary or from the master-elect offering them an office. That we need to work together. We need some joined up thinking. We need some teamwork within our lodge officers to make sure that what we do as secretaries, director of ceremonies, and everything else, masters-elect, is working with and is consistent with the mentoring process. So, yeah, we need to learn when people decide to leave, and we need to improve as a result. Thank you.
There's a question from Rob Jones from the Garston Group. Should the lodge membership officer be included on the lodge summons?
Absolutely.
I think that's a very easy answer, isn't it?
Yes, yes, and there is a question yet to be resolved, but there is a question about whether it should be a collared office. So I don't want to get too bogged into that, but I do want to acknowledge if you like, the elephant in the room. That is an issue which has been well discussed, above my pay grade, if you like. And so we need to wait and see what happens there. And that the argument for that is to have parity between the membership officer and the mentor. What I would say is, there's a lot of comments that have been made over the years that sometimes those people who chase collars for the benefits the collar might bring to them sometimes gets in the way of having the right person in the right job. What we need, if we want our lodge to work well, we need the right people in the right jobs in the lodge, and we need those jobs to be working well.
Yeah. There's just a couple of questions coming on the same thing. The first one is to do with the point that Paul Renton made earlier, which says if we've got the same membership that we had in 1920, but we have a lot more lodges. And do you think that's an issue? And that's joined in with another question from Rory Green, which I think slightly more bluntly puts it: do you think there are too many lodges in West Lancashire?
Well, I'm not going to comment on West Lancashire. That's not for me to do.
Neither am I.
But I mean, you're asking a question which really, in order to answer it, I need to take off my hat as a member of the MWP subgroup and answer in a purely personal capacity. So, what I've sought to do is to describe and explain to you the member's pathway and how it may be used. But you're now asking essentially for a personal opinion. What I'll try to do is give you some basic facts. There were just under 4,000 lodges. Well, the last lodge that was founded in 1920 was 4,000 and something or other. Can't remember the exact number. We now have 7,300 and round about that number. We have, given that some of those 4,000 lodges were no longer working, we have about twice as many lodges as we had in 1920. And our average membership at the moment is about 32 per lodge. Now, much lower than that, and the lodge becomes difficult to sustain. If you've got the active involvement of everybody at 32, you might be okay. And if you have a range of skills at 32 members, you might be okay. And if you're turning over your lodge offices so that new people are developing the skills while experienced people are there to support them, you might be okay. But there's a lot of lodges at 32 who are in difficulty because they haven't done those things, or because they haven't got the active involvement of a lot of people. So, you might conclude from that the ratios are in trouble or are difficult. And the truth is, of course, in the intervening 100 years, we had a big growth in membership post the two world wars. And you could describe that as a tidal wave. It was a temporary rush through, and we've settled back down to our underlying numbers. What we don't want is to go any lower. We want to arrest, and we then want to see how we can help lodges grow. So the members' pathway is putting putting the toolkit into the hand of lodges to manage their own destiny. And one of the things it does is it offers lodges 8 different alternative futures. So if a lodge is struggling, it's not the case that it either somehow magically turns itself round, or it closes, or it amalgamates. That's 3 outcomes. There are 5 others, and I invite you to go into the members pathway to look at that. The truth is that once a lodge is given its warrant, as long as it complies with the Book of Constitutions, then it can carry on meeting. So it really is, if there are too many lodges, it's in lodges' hands to manage their future, either revive themselves, and the members pathway will help you do that, or find another outcome and eventually close. So it's not for me to say, what we should do. Otherwise, it's in the lodge's hands, and we've given the lodges the toolkit now.
There's a point coming from Jonathan Selko just saying, if somebody proposes, or somebody brings a friend and proposes them into a lodge, but who it becomes clear that they wouldn't necessarily fit, how would you, or does the pathway offer a provision for that, where you may suggest to somebody that they're not the right person for the lodge, or because can you really ask somebody to withdraw a candidate?
Yeah, and so the reason we are cautious and careful at steps 3, 4, and 5, and indeed at 6, is to try to pick up those false positives, the people who we might otherwise accept, but who don't make a good fit with the lodge, or who find that the lodge is not right for them, and isn't able to meet their expectations. People leave membership organisations when they're dissatisfied. That's why they leave. The letters that we receive as secretaries, and I am a secretary, the letters we receive tend to say increased family or work commitments. The truth tends to be that people leave because they're dissatisfied. And what they're often dissatisfied with is somebody or people within the lodge. And this normally only comes to light when people not connected with the lodge talk to them, and that, through some sort of exit interview process. So what the members pathway does is it tries to, if you like, front load all the stuff, to look at before we've initiated them, at all the things we can do to get our best prediction as to whether this person is likely to not only be a good Freemason, but somebody who wants to be and who will thrive in our particular lodge. And that's why the lodge profile is so important. That's why the candidate profile is so important. And that's why taking our time through those early stages is so important. Does it specifically address, whether we might say to someone, you might be better off in a different lodge? It doesn't specifically do that after we've initiated them. It does address how we might have that conversation beforehand.
Sure. There's a question coming, which I think may be more applicable for next week when we've got the Grand Secretary with us, which is about the financial pressures that members have on them from joining other lodges. Would it be possible to have a more flexibility, or to offer modular membership at reduced cost? Like I say, I think that's possibly a question for next week when we've got David Staples with us.
Yes, indeed, and David is much better qualified to address those possibilities. I think it's interesting, however, that we're getting, perhaps it's because of the times we're going through, and we're having to think differently. We are getting a lot of creative thinking, and again, this is a personal comment. I welcome creative thinking. I think that's where we're able, that acts as the crucible through which we're able to develop new ways forward. One thing I would say about costs, the members pathway does encourage us to be explicit about the costs, the true costs of joining. The last thing we want is for somebody to join and then discover they can't afford it. So let's look at that, and there are some tools in the members pathway to help with that. I think there's another issue that I would comment on there. What people tend to want when they become a voluntary member of a membership organisation, and Freemasonry is no different, what they tend to want is value for money. So when people are unhappy, they might cite costs. When they're not unhappy, they talk about value, or they use language which reflects value. And if you compare the cost of joining a lodge and a chapter with the cost of joining some other things that men of a certain age might wish to join, we have the potential to offer great value for money. So again, value for money is a subjective thing, and it comes down to the extent to which people are enjoying, satisfied with their membership, involved in the way in which they wish to be. Although research into membership organisations has shown that although there was a problem immediately after 2008, cost of membership is rarely a real barrier to membership if it's known up front. So when we hear people talk about costs, it may hide or it may be a cover to a concern they have about value.
Okay. Just to finish up then, if a lodge is interested in the pathway, is wanting to have a look at how they are going to develop into the future, what do you think is the best way of them accessing the information? Where do they start? It's obviously a big piece of work, and to facing it to look at all 11 steps from the word go. Where do you think is a good entry point for them, if that's not a really silly question and you're going to say step one?
No, it's a great question. And to do that, I'll take you onto the portal itself. So I'll type the web address for this into the chat area. And then I'll just click through a few of the links to show you. This is where I have to make sure I'm spelling correctly. Okay, so b.ugle.org.uk membership. And if you type that into your browser, that will take you to this page here. Now, this has been designed to say, to answer the question, what do I want? Well, I want to get an overview. So, there's various overview documents. There's an introductory leaflet. That was the leaflet that was published when we first launched the Members Pathway. So you can print that off. There's an executive briefing that gives a bit more background to it, aimed especially at provincial officers and so forth. You can then go to the next layer down, read about the key stages in the Members Pathway. So how do I introduce new members to my lodge? And when you click on that, that will take you to a page with some links into the steps themselves. So step 5, for example, preparing the prospective candidate for interview. That will take you into that. So you can look at the Members Pathway through the layers, the overview, the key stages, digging deeper into it, and just click on those links and follow what you're interested in. If you want to get a more in-depth understanding, I would go to the key stages layer here, start at the beginning, and literally click through. But it's going to be the membership officers who might do that. Most members themselves are not going to do that. They're going to stay at this level here. And as secretaries, you might want to look at the introduction. Remember what I said, brethren, that there's words here, there's not many pictures, but that is changing. We're working on that. We're looking at how we can turn these into, take the content, take the words and put them into something that's far more visually appealing and easy to follow. You might want to look at something that's a sort of intermediate between the introductory leaflet and the full steps. And this will be good for a secretary. So this is called the Quick Start Guide. Still got the links into the steps, and it's got some introductory material or some overview material. So it's probably pretty much what I've covered now with a bit more detail. So there's literally a page per step here, with a bit more on the interviewing with some areas for questions. So as lodge secretaries, I'd probably direct you more towards this, and just to show you how to get that, land on that page, get an overview, go to the quick start guide. But bear in mind that the materials here are, whilst the words will stay, the presentation of them is going to get much, much, much better. So I'll just, I hope that addresses that question.
Thank you, Tony. There is just one final question, which I think helps sum it up. It's from Stephen Lunt, just about going back to daytime lodges. And I think it kind of sums up making the lodge fit for purpose, or having, thinking about the kind of candidates that might want to attract. It's about, could a lodge be encouraged to become a daytime lodge to assist these members? And I think that kind of sums up a part of the exercise that step one might lead you to.
I think if there was a few key messages that I would want you as lodge secretaries and scribees to take on board, is the fundamental value of step one, the need to have a good person in the role of lodge membership officer, and also to embrace the opportunity that the members pathway gives you. It lays it out for you. You don't have to slavishly do everything it says. What you do have to do is say, this is good advice, good practice. It's backed up. There's support from the province. Let's use it, let's follow it, and let's make it work for us. And let's apply ourselves and our experience in an intelligent and reasoned manner to get the best from it. So step one is absolutely key, because step one gets you into the position where you're saying, what is our way forward? What do we want to be in the future? And what are the steps we take now to get there? Number two, get the right person in as the lodge membership officer. And number three, embrace the members pathway and get all the best bits from it and make them work for you.
Tony, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you here this afternoon. Those links are available in the chat. We'll also make sure they are available on the website. So thank you very much, Tony. I'm going to hang up now and answer any questions that may be coming in. Other than that, thank you very much for being here, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, brethren. I really appreciate the opportunity. Sorry I couldn't answer every question. Simply time. It's not the willpower, it's the time. But thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having me once again.
Brilliant. Well done, Tony.
Thank you, Phil.
Very good.
Thank you for that, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony, for very, very informative lecture this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Provincial Grandmaster. Thank you, Tony. I do appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And don't forget, you're always to come here anytime.
Say again, Tony. Sorry.
You're welcome in West Lancashire anytime.
Yeah.
Thank you. I may well take you up on that. Thank you. That's very kind of you.